Hey guys, welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Welcome back to another gun store vlog where today we're going to take another look at the firearms market as of June 2022. There's a lot of stuff going on in the economy right now with a potentially looming recession, so I want to talk about how all of that might apply to the firearms market. So if that sounds interesting to you, please stick around. That's coming up now. Okay, on this channel, I like to check in with you guys about every 2 to 3 months and give you guys an update on what I'm seeing inside the firearms industry. I work within the industry. I try and keep my finger on the pulse and relay that information to you guys every couple months. The last time I did a video on this topic was back in March of this year. At the time, I had noticed a slowdown in demand, and as a result, I predicted that we would start to see a drop in firearm pricing. I think a lot of that has come true, and I think a lot of that will continue. I think that there's also some changes that have happened recently within the economy. A lot of people are predicting an upcoming recession, so I want to talk about the implications of that as well as it would apply to the firearms industry in general. First, let's go ahead and take a look at the economy. So as I'm sure a lot of you are noticing, and definitely are showing frustration about, and I am as well, is the ever-increasing pricing of fuel. Now, here locally in Indiana, we are paying over $5 a gallon. I know in some parts of the country it's upwards of $6, $7 a gallon, and that's expected to increase. Inflation is also really high right now at about 8.7, 8.8%, and the Federal Reserve just had an all-time high in an increase of the interest rates of 75% of 1 percentage point, 3/4 of a percentage point, if you will. That actually follows an increase of 0.5 percentage point that just happened a few months ago. So the Fed is trying to increase the interest rates to discourage borrowing, which is going to slow down economic activity, which is going to decrease demand, which is going to hopefully keep a cap on inflation, thus increasing the spending power of the dollar that everybody has in their pocket. Now with that, if the intended purpose is to slow down demand, that's of course going to have an effect on all commodity goods, including firearms. Now, due to the higher price of gasoline, the higher inflation, and of course other contributing factors such as fatigue in the marketplace, due to all the massive purchasing that had happened in 2020 and 2021, we are undoubtedly seeing a drop in demand in the firearms industry. If we look at the NICS data as just a basic barometer for where things are, now it's not the entire picture. NICS is the Instant Criminal Background Check System. They are the ones conducting the background checks on the 4473 forms that you are completing inside of a gun store. Now, I do understand that in most states you can do a private sale, in which case a NICS background check is not run. Therefore, those numbers are not included in this data. However, if we just use it for a basic sort of indicator of where the market is headed, we're actually seeing, and this is really interesting to me, that in May of this year, so just this past month, we had 2,340,000 background checks. Now, if we go back to the same month in 2019, that's pre-pandemic and all the demand that was spiked up from the pandemic and the rioting and all that, we had 2,349,000. So for the first time since before the pandemic, before 2020, the background check data has actually shown a drop. It is actually lower on a month-by-month comparison to 2019 for the first time. So that means we are actually back to below 2019 levels, which is a very big drop-off from where we had been experiencing demand in 2020 and 2021. Now keep in mind, seasonality is going to play a factor there. In the firearms industry, your warmer months, so this is going to be about May through about September, or I'd say August, late August, early September. Typically, as you see a slow period, there's definitely seasonality there, and it's always known as the off-season for firearms and ammunition sales. Now, you can see that in the data as well if you look in previous years. Now, in 2020 and in 2021, we didn't really experience seasonality because demand was very, very heavy throughout both entire calendar years. But this year, we're definitely starting to see seasonality. Now, how much of that is seasonality and how much of it is just a general drop in demand? Well, the seasonality, if we're comparing month over month to previous years, the seasonality should be there. 2019 would have had the seasonality too. But the numbers actually this year, even though a little bit lower, it's down by about 9,000, which is a very, very small drop, but it's still lower than it was in 2019. Now we have to remember that firearms are a commodity. Past your first one, to your second, your third, your fifth, your 20th is not necessarily a necessity. So with the rising pricing of fuel, that's causing other goods to increase in price, like food or parts for your car or anything like that. Even ammunition, which is also a contributing factor to why people would be spending less on firearms, is going to cause the prices of those other goods to go up, which is going to, of course, take priority in people's wallets when they need to put food on the table, repair the car, things like that, or especially put fuel in the car to get their kids to school or get themselves to work. Now, where is this headed with a potential recession looming? Now, economists are currently debating on whether or not we are going to end up in a recession. Now, the technical definition of a recession is a quarter, so it's 2 consecutive quarters of a drop in GDP. Now, in the first quarter of this year, we had a drop of GDP of about 1.5%. That's the gross domestic product. Now, we'll have to see where we end up in the second quarter of this year as well, but there's other sort of loose factors that you can apply towards a recession. The first thing and the interesting thing is your unemployment. Now, right now, the unemployment rate is actually very low. It's sitting at about 3.5%. Typical recession rates, if I remember correctly, are about 5 to 6%. So we're far off in terms of having an unemployment rate that is akin to what you would experience in a general recession. But we do have the Federal Reserve actively trying to slow down the economy with the raising interest rates. So if businesses are not able to borrow as much money, if home buyers and vehicle buyers are not able or willing to borrow as much money because of the raising interest rates, that's going to slow down the purchasing of those goods. If the demand comes down, hopefully the price will come down to follow, and that's the whole idea of reducing the inflation, is at least increasing the value of the dollar, not decreasing it. Now, if all those goods are affected and borrowing is down, business expansion is down, businesses are going to be selling less products. Now, we can look at how this might tie into something like ammunition. Now, you do have a baseline price for a commodity that's going to be set by your logistics. That's, again, a big part of that's your cost of distribution and your transportation of moving those goods, getting the raw material to your factory, building them, shipping them out. The fuel prices are going to, of course, cause those logistic prices to go up. If they need to get the pricing down and the fuel pricing is not able to come down due to the lack of supply or availability of that fuel coming into the marketplace, there are other ways to skin the cat. Typically, one of the things that businesses do to cut their costs is they start reducing labor. That's laying people off. You saw that in big numbers in the Great Recession of 2008. Anytime there is an economic downturn, one of the first things that is done is to reduce the labor force. Unfortunately, you have fewer people working, you have fewer consumers out there in the market, therefore turning around and buying products. So, now, where does this tie back into firearms? If there are fewer people able to afford things, there's not also the effect of people wanting to not purchase as many things. There are people that have an abundance of something that they look to sell. Firearms is one of those types of commodities where a lot of people have collections they may have inherited and be sitting on, or they've purchased, back when they had a lot of money and there was a lot of demand for those goods. They may have purchased several, but now the demand is lower and they need that income, or they need that cash for other things like putting gasoline in the car or putting food on the table. They will sell those goods off. I've seen this many times. I've been in this business for nearly a decade. I've seen this cycle before, where you have a span of time where people purchase a lot. You also have a span of time where people sell a lot. It's very rarely at the same time. They sort of overlap. So when there's a lot, and it's interesting, when there's a lot of demand for product and the prices are high, people tend to buy. When there's no demand and prices are low, people tend to sell. It's an interesting phenomenon I've actually seen happen time and time again. It happens in the stock market as well too. When the stock prices are exploding, people buy in. When the stock prices start dropping, people sell out. So you would think that you would want it to flip on the other side. And so that's just something to consider. If you're looking to sell, you might want to do that when the market's hot. If you're looking to buy, do it when the market's low. So to give you guys a example, I do gun broker listings, and I usually will do about 8 on Tuesday nights ending Thursday night, and I do penny start no reserve. And a normal market, I'll expect probably out of 8 we'll do like 5 will end about where I expect they will. 2 will end over the market because people get in bidding wars, and 1 might end a little bit lower. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had 8 firearms, and every single one, all 8, performed by about 20 to 25% less based on where I had seen other similar firearms sell before. When I make offers on firearms, I look at GunBroker to see where the market is, and then that's where I make my offers. So I had made offers on those firearms based on where the market was, and within a 1 or 2 week period, the market had dropped about 20%. I mean, on every single one. It wasn't a fluke on just one of them, but it was every single one. They had all underperformed. So I'm actually not putting things on GunBroker right now, just because, you know, the market seems to be very much softening in that regard. So sort of a very, I know it's a little anecdotal, but just a small data point to provide to you guys. Now, to finish this up with one other point, there is one thing unique about this industry, is that demand curves can go against the tide of the standard economic field of what's going on in the economy due to black swan events. That means, you know, the economy could be really bad, but we could have something like pending gun legislation, and still that would cause demand for firearms to go up. When it comes to events like that, I'm starting, you know, we're kind of in the middle of this political period where there's a lot of debate of gun control and things like that. I am actually seeing zero effect of that due to the politics of what's going on right now. The most recent school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, happened at the end of last month, and again, last month was a low since 2019. Actually, since 2018. It's higher than 2018, but lower than 2019. So, you know, looking at the past 2.5 years, it was actually the lowest month if we look at a year-over-year comparison. And that follows, in the last week of that was following that horrific shooting and a lot of political fallout. So we didn't see a massive surge. Now we could look in June and see where the numbers are going to be in June. I predict that the June numbers are going to follow the same trend. You might see a small uptick, but I think generally a lot of people are just so, you know, over all the purchasing, and so kind of just not in the market and having to deploy their discretionary income in other places right now, that we're not seeing an effect in the gun industry. Again, I do think that you probably see a drop in pricing on used firearms because there's more elasticity and pricing on those goods than you do new, because new firearms do require, you know, all of the current market limitations to be produced and sold. I predict that in the next coming months we're going to continue to see dropping prices there, and that's what I have seen in the past couple months. Well, guys, that is all I have for you today on this one. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button. Please also consider subscribing to this channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when we are putting out new content. I'm going to leave you guys off with that. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.